Hey everybody, I want to welcome you back to or the next episode of the What Else Is New podcast. I'm Tim Graves, under the Graves Golf Academy, and I want to thank you guys for listening to these podcasts. I hope you guys are getting a lot out of them and enjoying these, the ones Todd and I do. And today I got James Bell with me again. I typically bring James in here a lot, but I have him with me again today. I drug him in here, and I wanted to talk about the new Paradym Smoke, the AI Smoke. And I hadn't planned on doing this, to be honest with you, but last year when they released the Paradym, the guys went to Hawaii, and before they officially released it, they started winning everything. It was like they went 2 for 2, 3 for 3, 4 for 4. I mean, it was John Rahm, and the guys started winning everything and winning with Paradym. And Callaway, I think, got kind of blindsided by that. And then this year they said, okay, we're going to release the smoke maybe a little bit earlier because it might happen again. Well, it happened earlier. Chris Kirk actually won last week, and he was hitting all the Paradym Smoke, and he was hitting the new putter, and he was hitting all the stuff. And all of a sudden the whole world wanted to know what was in Chris Kirk's bag. And, so we started seeing everything pop up on the Golf Channel. We started seeing it. Even I was watching Good Morning America this morning. There's an ad for Paradym Smoke, and because Callaway will do it. I mean, they start getting calls, they start getting emails, they start getting interest, and they're going to, obviously the marketing department is going to take it and run with it. And we were actually, and I'll back up a couple steps here. A couple of weeks ago, we got invited to come out to Callaway and to shoot video on the new Paradym Smoke, the drivers, the hybrids, the fairwoods, irons, everything. Well, the only thing we putters, yeah, everything. The only thing we didn't shoot was on really the wedges, because they're not going to be releasing a new wedge till September. But we were able to do this. We got the privilege to do it because we were actually selected as fitters of the year last year for Callaway. And I want to thank James for that, because he had a big play in that. I mean, there's literally hundreds of thousands of fitters out in this country. In fact, it's probably more than that. I mean, if I asked James, how many fitters do you think there are out there for Callaway? What would you say?
Callaway alone? Callaway,
yeah. What would you say?
10,000?
Yeah, 10th at least. I mean, at least there may be that many in just this section. So, yeah. But anyway, because every golf course claims to be a fitter. So you think about it. Anyway, and we were nominated. We were actually selected as fitters of the year last year. So it was a real feather in our hat. But we were brought out there, and there was, I think, 9 or 10 groups. And these are the big players for Callaway. I mean, these are the guys that do a lot of internet sales for Callaway. But I mean, these are guys that sell millions and millions and millions of Callaway dollars of Callaway product. And they basically set up stations for us, a dozen stations. And we got to go from station to station to station and film. And each station either had a marketing person at that station talking about the new product. So they kind of had a line they were going to talk to you about. Or you go to a station and there was an engineer who had created the product, or the guy who actually ran the engineering department that created the product. And so I did a lot of filming out there. We filmed for like 7 hours. And James was out there and he was making sure I was doing it right. But I wanted in this podcast to talk a little bit about just kind of some broad spectrum or broad terms, what we saw out there and what the difference between the new Paradym Smoke and the last year's Paradym. Because last year's Paradym was a huge hit. It was huge. In fact, it was a lot bigger than Callaway thought it was going to be. Callaway has good years and bad years, and they never thought they were going to have what did they call it, an epic year, or what did they call it? Or they said an epic year. What was it?
It was epic. It was massive was another word they used.
Yeah. What was the year? The year they first used the AI computer, I think, was on
Epic Flash.
Epic Flash.
Because it did with the flash face technology.
Right. And they said that they called that their epic year.
Yeah. And they said this was the game changer.
Right. And they said that they literally matched that with Paradym last year. And they believe that this one will be even the next step up. And, we're just like you guys out there. We're always like, well, how much better is this? This is the questions I ask them. How can you guarantee this is better? How can you, every year you're going to tell me there's something new going on, and so on. I'm like, and I'm not a pessimist but I'm asking the questions I think my students would ask. I'm asking the questions I think you guys out there would ask.
Well, we go nerdy. That's the bad part.
Right. But I'm asking the questions like, can you guarantee me this is longer? Can you guarantee me this is better than last year? And when you're talking to the engineers, yeah, they can. So it was kind of really cool. And so I want to talk to James this morning about kind of your perception of what you learned out there, what you saw out there, and what you want to tell our customers or our students about the new Paradym Smoke. Because we'll release this here. when we're releasing the new videos on Paradym Smoke. We got a bunch of them. When the Callaway's going crazy and we're selling Paradym Smoke and we're taking all the trade-ins from last year's clubs to the new clubs, our lease program, as we like to laugh about.
Yeah.
But let's talk about that a little bit. So what do you think of the Paradym Smokes first? Let's just talk straight, James. You've been with Callaway for years and years and years and years. Longer than I have. I mean, you actually went out in the field doing Callaway fitting.
I started with them in 2004.
Yeah. So you've been there. I was actually with Titleist and TaylorMade then. So, I mean, you've been with them longer than I have been.
It took you long to come over to the dark side.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's 20 years you've been with them. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you've seen at least 20 generations of clubs. In fact, Callaway would probably tell you close to 25 generations of clubs in that time. So why is the Paradym Smoke, in your opinion, because you're as much an expert as anybody in the world on this, why is the Paradym Smoke better than anything out there right now? That's what I'm asking you from what you learned last week.
The fun part being out there a couple of weeks ago was nerds are fun to talk to. The marketing guys are boring.
That's very funny.
California's beautiful.
It's so funny that the marketing guys are so cautious about what they say, and the engineering nerds don't give a crap. They're just going to go.
Well, the marketing guys have a script, and they're going to tell you all the great, pretty words and all this, and the nerds in the back are going to go, look at this. This is really groundbreaking. It's
so funny because we had Tristan and Mason out there filming in there. So I had my video guys out there and James is out there and he was filming part and James was doing some stuff I was doing. And it was so funny. You get a marketing guy and their eyes are up and they're looking at the camera. And they're talking to the camera. You get the engineers, their eyes are down and you couldn't even get them looking at the camera. They're like, they were so nervous to look at the camera.
For God's sakes, look at me in the eyes. I'm talking to you here.
In fact, that one guy who did I think he did the hybrids or
the driver guy.
No, I thought it was the Fairywood guy. The driver guy was awesome.
He didn't look at you though.
Yeah, but the Fairywood guy who hadn't been on a camera before,
he was scared.
He was scared. I mean, he was scared. And in fact, when they got done, his supervisor was standing there, remember?
Yeah.
And he was like, "How did I do?" And the supervisor was like, "You did okay."
You're okay. Just like drawing information out of it. Exactly. But anyway, let's go back to the new Paradym Smoke.
So talk to me about it.
The biggest thing I drew out of the conversations we have with Callaway is how much they went back to, or actually they didn't go back to it. They went to looking at everyday golfers, how they hit the golf ball.
I agree.
And how they integrated AI. And David talked about this at a great level with one of the videos. And he talked about, AI, smart learning, computer learning. Well, it's the buzzword, but it's how Callaway did it, which was amazing.
And let's be honest here. AI is artificial intelligence, but it's not something, there's a buzzwords about AI where people are freaked out by AI. Like it's a scary thing. Like it's going to take over the world.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Well, Callaway's taking AI. Now this is their 5th or 6th year into AI. I mean,
it's longer than that.
Okay.
They've been using AI for 10 years plus.
But the computer, the
big computer came out with that big flash.
Right. And that was 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Because I know when I went out in a big
2019.
When I went out in a big meeting and it was a big thing they had and they introduced this AI computer, they literally, the Doc Hawk who got up in front of everybody, and he's the one that's kind of the godfather of this computer. He said, when he put it up there, he goes, we just set the golf industry 25 years behind us.
Yeah.
And they spent, it was an incredible, it was like 500 million. It was crazy amount of money in this computer. But
it's the data they're putting into it now.
And that's what we kept asking these engineers. Because we kept saying, explain how you're doing this. And they said, you don't understand the amount of data we pour into this computer. Yep. And he said, most companies build their clubs by talking to the pros.
Yes.
Meaning they'll go to a pro and say, what do you like about this club? What do you not like about it? What do you like? And so all of a sudden you get a club that's built, and it fits a certain skill level of golfers. They said the difference Callaway did is they're constantly taking data, and he's talking millions and millions of points and data points.
Yep.
From average typical golfers, guys that shoot 90, guys that shoot 100, guys that can't break 100, guys that shoot 80. Guys
what they ended up doing is they were mapping every contact point on a golf club to a swing. Not only, putting a contact point on a club, say, yeah, great, but they're actually matching it to the individual, and they're looking at, how was the club delivered to the ball? What was the reaction?
Because
what speed was it done?
It's very interesting. When I was out there, and this was like 10 years ago, I've gone to Callaway now for like 12 or 13 years and filmed. Like 10 years ago, I went out with Todd, and I was sponsored by Callaway at the time, and they put me in a fitting bay, and they put me in there and they said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you this driver, and we want you to hit it, and we're going to see exactly where you're hitting on the face of this driver. Well, the driver they handed me was one that was sitting in there. It was a regular flex driver. I take the back. It was a senior flex driver with this head I'd never seen before. And the very first one I hit like 3 inches off in the toe. I mean, it was so far on the toe. I mean, it almost felt like I whiffed it. Okay. Yeah. And it was because there was so much downward deflection in the shaft because it was so weak for me that it bent down and it caught me on the toe. Well, the second one I hit, it was like the first one was like 2 inches towards the toe. The second one I hit with the club was like an inch towards the toe. The third one was dead off the sweet spot. Okay. And you could see they mapped this thing out and you could see it on this big screen. And the guy looked at me and he said, this is why you never get a good player and allow him to hit a club more than 3 times.
No.
And I go, why? And he goes, because they'll figure out how to time the shaft. They'll time the face. They know what it's supposed to feel like. And they'll go right to the sweet spot within 3 hits, 3 to 4 hits. He goes, we can hand you a ladies club with a little bitty head. And he goes, in 4 hits, you'll find the sweet spot. He goes, but here's the deal. Average golfers can't do that.
No, because their swing isn't consistent enough to do it.
And so what they'll do, and they don't know the feel, they don't know the timing because they just haven't done that for that long. Okay. They haven't developed a mastery yet.
No.
So what they do is that average golfer now, he's hitting 100 shots and they're all towards the toe. Now, one may be a half inch towards the toe, one may be an inch and a half towards the toe, one may be kind of by the sweet spot, but he's not going to ever hit it towards the heel.
No.
He'll hit it towards the toe forever until he changes his swing or vice versa. Well, unless you're getting a computer to map that or to see that, there's nothing you can do about it.
No.
So what Callaway did is they didn't care about good players. They didn't care about great players. No. They already had that information.
Well, they have the data because, I mean, they'll put it on iron by iron and they'll set the club up.
That's it.
To deliver a club square to all the different data points or all the different impact points on the head.
Right.
But iron by iron isn't going to swing the club across the face, hitting it on the toe.
Right.
Or inside out hitting it on the heel.
They'll try, and I watched them do that, where they'll set it like an inch towards the toe or whatever with a tee, but iron byron's still doing it in a perfect path.
Yeah.
It's impossible for iron byron to go outside in, inside out.
They can't put all the other variables in there.
But average golfers can. So every year, they're getting more and more information. In fact, they're loading tons and tons and tons of data points as we speak for upcoming clubs.
Yes.
So go back to that again. So now you kind of understand how they're using the AI technology. So every year they're getting more and more and more information put into this computer. And the thing that was very interesting is that for the first year, they really just used this AI technology that they created for drivers and a little bit in fairway woods.
Yep.
The second, third year, they started pouring into fairway woods because that was why when Epic Flash was a big deal in the driver, but it wasn't as big a deal in the fairway wood. And then all of a sudden the next year came out and the Maverick came out and the Rogue came out and all of a sudden the fairway woods were just hotter than crap. Mm-hmm. Remember that one that they guarantee you 10 extra yards with the Rogue fairway wood because they put the AI technology in that. Well, guess what? Now they're pouring this AI technology not only in the drivers, fairway woods, hybrids, and irons.
Well, and even within the irons, when they were talking about, you're talking to the nerds, they're doing it on every different head.
Yeah.
And every different loft.
Yep.
Because they all react differently.
Right. And so Callaway created this year, they have, and I'm going to have you, because I'll mess this up, but in their iron line, they had a regular Paradym Smoke.
Yes.
A Smoke HL.
Yes.
A Smoke Go Get Fast, HL Fast. Am I right? Those three?
Smoke Fast.
And then was another one?
No, that's
those three. Okay.
Just the 3 lines. They got 4 lines in the driver. They've got 3 lines in the irons.
And the normal Paradym. So if you're going to rate these things, and this is how we're going to do it, because this is when we talked to the engineers, how it was. A Paradym was basically set up for a guy who had decent swing speed, that took a divot, that did need a whole lot of forgiveness in iron, wanted a lot more feel than forgiveness, right? The normal Paradym.
There's still a lot of forgiveness in the iron.
No, there's a ton of forgiveness, but he's looking for as much feel as forgiveness. Okay, in the iron. Okay, because these are cast irons. I mean, okay. Then you had the Paradym HL. And the HL is set up for a guy who takes basically no divot, minimal to no divot, because it's got a much thicker sole on the club, right?
It is, but if you really look at it, the playability side of the sole is still small.
It is, but
it looks huge, but it's because of where all the mass is, all the weight is down there.
Pour the tungsten in the bottom. Yep. So, because when they tore these heads apart and they're showing us on film, and we can't obviously do it in a podcast, but we can do it when you guys see the film, you can see how bigger that piece of tungsten is on the bottom of those HLs than the regular Paradym.
Yep.
So they got obviously the center of gravity that was put lower and lower and lower on the HL.
And it's more balanced too, because these engineers, God love them. They've counterbalanced the head heel to toe on the weight of the hosel.
Right.
And the thickness of the hosel. Right. So there's more In the more forgiving clubs, there's more weight a little bit on the toe.
There has to be, because the clubs are slightly more offset.
Yes.
Because the HL has slightly more offset to help you. So the HL is built to help you get high launch in the ball.
It is, but it's not as, the offset's not as big as what's on the other Big Bertha, which is their super ultimate game improvement line.
And the interesting thing that we saw in this, so you got more cavity back, it's bigger cavity back. You got a wider sole, a little bit wider sole. You got more weight on the bottom of it, and you got a little bit more offset, high launch. So but we kept talking distance, like this club's longer. And they kept saying no. They kept talking height, because they said what people don't realize is that the average golfer doesn't hit the appropriate height.
They never hit that window where the club is supposed to be.
Right. What they optimize. So, if it's, like you go and you get on a launch monitor and you need to hit your 9-iron, 90 feet. They said the average guy will hit it 60 feet or 70 feet. That's the average golfer. Well, if he's hitting at 90 feet, he's hitting that thing 120 yards. If he's hitting at 60 feet, he's hitting at 100 yards.
Yes.
And he goes, so we're not trying to find distance. We're trying to find height.
Yep.
And that's what they're talking about. So every time we talk to engineers, they're not talking distance. They're talking, how do we get you that height?
How do we put you in that window?
Which is low in the center of gravity of the club. And so the theme this year on Smoke, to me, on the fairway woods, the hybrids, the irons in particular, was getting that the center of gravity lowered, making it easier to hit that height. Do you agree with that?
Yes. The playability, it all came down to the playability.
Right.
And the only way irons and all that become playable is you have to get them in the air.
Right.
Because you have to, in order to make the iron work, it has to come into its target area or into the green at a certain angle for it to work.
Right.
If it doesn't, it comes in too low, and that's where you get the scooters that just hit the green and roll off.
And that's what they're saying. They say, an average player hits a wedge, a 9-iron, 8-iron, should be able to hold any green. Don't care how hard the green is.
No.
And he's going 90% of golfers, he wouldn't say it. He was like a high percentage of golfers, they hit those clubs. They can't hold a green with the 8-iron. They can't hold a green with the 7-iron because they're not hitting the optimal window, is what they kept calling it. And that's what these engineers were saying. So the engineers weren't sitting there saying, we're trying to get more distance this iron. We're trying to get more height for the average golfer. And then that height with ease of hitting will then convey into more distance.
Yes.
Because it'll hold in the air longer.
Yeah. And that goes back to, again, everyone sees, oh my God, it's got so much, the loft is so much lower.
Right.
But it's there because of the amount of weight that they put down low in the club. Right. They have to play with the lofts in order for it to not fly above the window now that they've been looking at.
And it's so funny. You talk to the engineers and they never talk loft. They could care less.
Nope.
They never bring it up. It's so funny. Every time we talk to our typical golfers out there, like, well, the loft of this is so cranked, so strong or so whatever. And I'm talking to these engineers who design the club. They're the guys who are the godfathers of this club, and none of them talk loft. They don't care. It's just, this iron needs to go this far. This iron needs to go this far. And it's going to go. And so, because here's what happens. If all of a sudden you put the center of gravity so low in an 8-iron that you turn it into the height of a wedge, you're going to lose a ton of distance because it's going to go way too high. Okay. Or the optimal wedge. So what they're going to do is they say, we want an 8-iron to hit this trajectory. Okay. Well, all of a sudden they lower the center of gravity and they say, okay, that's going too high. They're going to deloft it because they're going to try to bring it down. Mm-hmm. This is by trials. Well, all of a sudden when they bring it down to get the optimal height, it goes longer.
Yeah.
So then that's what happens. So they could care less about loft. It's so funny. I mean, we'll sit there and say, an old wedge, we'll ask a guy, it was 46 degrees, a new one's 41 degrees. And look at like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm trying to hit a certain launch angle.
Yeah. The engineers will build out a set of clubs and they'll go, okay, this club, we're going to call it club A is going to go a given distance, a given height.
Right.
And then they'll go down, okay, next playability, it has to go for the average player 12 to 15 yards shorter.
Right.
So we're going to make the next club is going to look like this. And it's going to have, here's the weighting in order to get the height. Okay, here's the loft adjustments. And they build the set that way. And the old mindset that we all deal with goes, oh my God, it's always been a 9-iron has been 42 degrees of loft.
And it's not even close.
No, lose the numbers,
Lose the numbers. It's so crazy because, and I actually have guys that will send in club fittings for me and they'll want them bent to this loft and they're just screwing the clubs up. Yep. And the engineers will tell you that. I mean, it's pretty crazy how this is. They're putting them back to their old day lofts and they're just screwing these clubs up because now all of a sudden you create this wedge that has a complete different center of gravity. It's so much lower than a wedge from 5 years ago. And you put that same loft on there, it's going to go to the moon. You basically turn it into like a lob wedge.
Yeah. Take 2 steps forward and
you can't catch it. Yeah. It's crazy. And here's the other thing that was very interesting, that when we talked to these engineers out there and we went through this with these guys, they always talked about, they didn't talk about center of club hits. their main issue was miss hits, wasn't it?
Every time.
Because it's like, they're almost like saying, guys, we know you're not going to hit the center of the club. 1 out of 5 times, 1 out of 10 times you hit the center of the club. And that's what the average golfer does. It's like, like who has a worse spot of a dime on the front face? Well, Mo Norman did, because he had a perfect swing. But if you look, he goes, you look at average guys, they got the size of a silver dollar in the front of their face. He goes, so you're missing it off. So it's not about, it's increasing the size of that sweet spot. Yeah. It's making that sweet spot better. It's making that when you miss it a quarter inch towards the toe or a half inch, you don't lose 20 yards. But here's the interesting thing to me. And this is my old school versus new school. These engineers we were talking to, what was the average age of these guys? You think it was? What do you think the average age was?
31, maybe 28.
I think
they're all youngins.
Oh God, they're so young. I mean, I was waiting to have that 56-year-old guy. No, these were pups. Yep. I mean, these guys were like Clayton and Tristan. They were pups. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I felt so old compared to these guys. I was like, okay, these guys are the nerds that understand computers. Yes. Okay. That was number one. Here's number two is when I talk about my clubs, and I still do it to this day. If I talk about a distance from an 8-iron to a 7-iron, I think it's about 10 yards. When I talk a distance from a 7-iron to 6-iron, I'm thinking 10, maybe 12 yards max. If I'm talking from a 9 to a wedge, it's 10 yards. I have 10-yard gaps. That's what I grew up with. These guys don't have 10-yard gaps. They have 12 to 15-yard gaps, don't they? I mean, no one talked
closer to 15, not 12.
No one talked 10-yard gaps because we talk like, okay, if you hit a wedge, 120 yards, what would you hit a 9-iron? They go, about 135. I'm like, what? And I'm like, I'm all of a sudden realizing there's bigger gaps because these clubs go so much freaking longer. Mm-hmm. So the difference between the top iron in your bag and the bottom iron in your bag used to be like 50 or 60 yards. Now it's like 100.
Yeah.
And they have 15-yard gaps between them. So number one, it even becomes more important how to learn how to choke down a little bit and take a little bit off a club because you got these bigger gaps. But number two is it's how long clubs have gotten. Am I right? I mean,
overall, yes.
Yeah. It's because I could take an old 6-iron, and if I hit it good, okay, with the speed I had, it was going 180. Okay. If I hit my 5-iron and I hit it good with my speed I had, this was 10 years ago, it was going 190. I take the same 6-iron right now with that same speed, it's going 210.
Yep.
And the 5-iron will actually go 230 because as you go up in distance, their gaps get wider.
Yes.
They have to. Yep. Because you still have to have the bottom somewhere at the bottom of the bag.
Well, also when the higher you go up in the clubs, like to the 4-iron, the 5-iron, the gapping, right? The loft gapping in them is smaller,
right?
Because of the amount of weight that these things have in them.
And that's the thing that's the thing that they work out. And that's where when people start adjusting lofts of the club on their own, they start screwing these things up because they're not only doing it by loft. You may have a difference of a 2-degree loft between a 5 and a 6-iron. And then between your 9 and your wedge, you might have a 5-degree loft. Am I right?
Yes.
Because they're doing it by the weight on the bottom of the club, by the reaction to the face, all that put together. Okay. Whereas if you start even gapping it out, you may hit your 5-iron 240 yards and your 6-iron might go 200 because you gapped it wrong.
Yes.
They're doing the gap by the weighting system in the club.
They're doing all the thinking for us.
Right.
All we have to do is say, okay, listen, here's your set.
Right. So
these are your playability sets.
That's why I don't never adjust the loft of these things. Ever. I don't. I will do length, lie angle, shaft flex, shaft weight, grip size. And we fit it all, but we don't jack with loft. And we don't do that because that's the engineers. And it's interesting. When we get guys that say, I want this loft adjusted, we'll get an email back in a minute going, are you sure?
Yeah. Why do you want to do this?
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Because that's the same guy who goes, I got to carry a 6-iron and a 6 hybrid because I got this huge gap. No.
Yeah.
These guys have figured it out. And that was the
not anymore. That's the next point I was going to go to.
And I want you to talk about that.
Into it.
Right.
Is they did so much study on how far a 6-iron goes versus a 6 hybrid now. And to alleviate that, oh my God, I've got such a gap differential between where my 7-iron goes or my 6 hybrid goes versus my 6-iron.
Right.
They now fly the same. Right. 6-iron flies the same as a 6 hybrid. Right. The difference is the hybrid's going to fly higher, land softer, and it's a lot easier to hit.
The biggest complaint they got, it wasn't a complaint. The biggest issue they were seeing with the average golfers was in their bag, they were seeing a big gap between their shortest hybrid and their longest iron. So like, let's say you had a 6 hybrid and a 7-iron, that the guy would say, I have a 10-yard gap between my clubs,
I have to put the corresponding iron and the hybrid in the bag.
I have a 30-yard gap between those. And the reason they're seeing that is because number one, hybrid is so much easier to hit, but it's because because the hybrid has got a wider sole, you can throw so much more weight below it that it makes it easier to hit the height.
Yep.
So what they did is they countered that this year. didn't they?
Yes. Yep.
And they did it by making the irons a little bit longer and making the hybrids a little bit, those hybrids not shorter to fit in the system better.
They did it by altering the length of the hybrid.
Exactly.
So it plays better.
Right. The length, the overall length
of the club.
Right. The lever length is what we call it. And when they said that, we were like, the first thing we went, ooh, we go, oh, man, amen. Because
about time.
That's one of the top questions we get is how big of a gap I can have between my hybrid and my iron? Well, and you go, you shouldn't. But you see that because hybrids are so much easier to hit than irons for most. But so that was the thing. So what else did you see in the smoke? I mean, I know that we're getting a little bit long in this. What else did you see in the smoke?
I think the testing was the biggest thing I saw.
Yeah.
How they came about making the change to the new technology. And the other one was when you held up the face and David started talking about micro deflections in the driver head.
Right.
From a tech nerd, I'm looking at that going, what the heck?
Right.
Because we used to do it, and David talked about old school. We would modify the angles on the outside with bulge and roll.
Right.
Now they're not messing with those anymore on the outside of the club. They're now changing it by thickness and flexibility
in the face
from the backside of the face. And I'm going, ooh,
yeah,
I have to rethink how I describe this
because. And you guys will see this. You may have seen it already before you hear this podcast, but the picture you're going to see this year is the driver face, and they're going to show you the Paradym Smoke driver face, and there's going to be about 10 to 12. 20. Well, there's going to be like 10 to 12 spots on it. You can see circles on it, and you'll see like plus 12, plus 2, plus 5, plus 6. And what that is they took last year's Paradym, which was considered the longest driver out there,
and the most consistent in
dispersion.
And
they compared that to the new Paradym Smoke and all those different data points. And they saw that 1 inch towards the toe was 12 yards longer with the smoke.
Yep.
A half inch towards the toe was 3 yards longer. A half inch towards the heel was 12 yards longer.
Yeah.
And so they said, when you're missing the driver off the sweet spot, you're gaining significant distance over what was considered the longest driver last year. And I said, so that's done in the Paradym. I said, if you had done this against not the Paradym, a club 2 or 3 years ago, and I asked him, David, this, or I guess maybe a Ping or a Titleist. He goes, oh yeah, you'd be like plus 20, plus 25, plus 30.
The original, when we walked into the room and David had that poster board there behind him, we're going, ooh, how old were those clubs that they were hit against? That's compared against what, couple years old, three generations old. He says, no, that's Paradym last year.
This is Paradym Smoke versus Paradym.
And your jaw hit the table. Yep. My eyes went about as big as a saucer, and I'm going, holy crap.
And I literally looked at my video guys, said, just film this.
We're just going to talk around
That's
that.
all we need.
Yeah.
Because Paradym was long and everybody loved it. In fact, we all had it in our bag and it was just long and it won so many tournaments. It was the number one driver on tour. John Rahm won the world with it. And all the guys did. Xander and all the guys with it. And now all of a sudden they got the Paradym Smoke in their hands. And what's interesting is I asked him, I said, if you hit it dead off the center of the sweet spot, is it longer? And remember that? Mm-hmm. He goes, I think Smoke would be a little bit longer.
It wasn't a great
difference.
No.
But he goes, and he looked at it, but he goes, average golfer doesn't have the sweet spot. He goes, they may do 1 out of 10. He goes, maybe once around, 1 out of 10 times. Yeah. He goes, you hit it a quarter inch towards the toe. I go, yeah. And he goes, it's 10 yards longer. He goes, you hit it a half inch towards the heel. He goes, it's 12 yards longer.
Yeah.
And he goes, this is the data points we put in the computer now.
The fun question was we threw at him and says, so what you're telling me, looking at the face here, you want me to hit this driver an inch off the center spot towards the toe? And he's going, no. He says, but compared to what you were hitting,
right,
it's going to be that much longer.
As he said, dead center, sweet spot, perfect path, perfect swing will still be the longest.
Yes.
But he goes, that's not what typical golfers do.
No.
He goes, typical golfers hit it slightly towards the toe or the heel or high or low in the driver. He goes, so that's why I said we've measured 21 different data points across the face, and we've now had the opportunity to put that many points in this AI computer to now be able to build something that is significant. So he goes, you took last year's Paradym,
yeah,
and he goes, you hit it a half inch towards the toe. He goes, and when he says, he's like 220 yards. He goes, you take this year's Paradym Smoke, you give it in the exact same spot with the exact same swing, it now goes 232 yards.
Yeah. And it's having those data points now and being able to show that. Before we used to talk about it.
Right.
We always would say, they've maximized center hits. The center hits can't go any further.
Right.
They sort of maximize the speed here.
Right.
But everything they're doing was to engineer something so that when you mishit the club, it was better.
Right.
And that was used to be, take my word on it. These engineers are doing this. Right. Now you can actually put this up and say, there's the hard data.
So to kind of end this, what we learned was that, the driver was that they took the Paradym they made it longer. But the biggest difference in the Paradym versus the previous year's driver, which was the Rogue ST Max, was the dispersion. It was 25 to 30% more accurate.
Yes.
And that's the first thing John Rahm said when he won that tournament in Hawaii last year. He goes, oh my God, he was hitting this driver off the heel.
I can't miss the fairway.
Because I can't miss the fairway. There was a quote that he goes, I'm missing this thing off the heel and I can't miss the fairway. He goes, it's ridiculous. And then this year, what they did is they took that same dispersion, which is still in the driver. That's still that accuracy. They didn't lose that accuracy.
No.
But they made the toe and heel longer, or the miss hits longer.
And so now they made the dispersion tighter as well.
Right. So now it's not only better dispersion, it's longer.
Yep.
So it's now, so you don't miss it. You don't lose 20 yards. Because I'm telling you right now, I have a driver 5 years old and I hit off the sweet spot. It goes 260. I hit off the heel to go 230. To go 220. I mean, you lose 20 to 30 yards off the heel. I mean, sometimes even longer. You heel hit it and you're like, I just added 4 clubs to this hole. I just added 3 clubs to this hole. You know what I'm saying? And I was watching Shell's Wonderful World of Golf last night, some late thing. And Nicholas was playing Palmer. And Nicholas hits a drive. And they're about the same distance when they're playing. This is when they were young. And Nicholas hits one right down the middle. And he had 162 yards in this hole. And it was really funny. He hit 6 iron. So it tells you how long this was. All this was, okay? He had 167 yards into the hole and he hit 6 iron. Well, Palmer got up over and he hit it. And he goes, I hit it off the heel. And okay.
He had 200 and what?
210.
Yes.
And he had 50 yards longer into the hole than Nicholas did. And he had to hit a 4 iron or 3 iron in there. And he was longer with his irons than Nicholas. Yeah. But he hit a 3 and he camped like 20 yards short. Okay. But he heeled it and lost like 50 yards. Okay. That's not the way it is anymore.
Not anymore.
Right. And I looked at this thing. I'm like, that's the difference in golf right now. They're not getting longer off the sweet spots. They're getting longer off the miss hits and significantly longer. And you guys, I know
significantly straighter.
Right. And you're hearing our words on this, but you'll see the videos on this. Hopefully you watch those. You'll watch you'll see the graphics that come up. This graphic that we had behind us will be the number 1 graphic for the driver.
Yeah.
But they did that in all the clubs. So the Smoke, you think it's going to be pretty popular this year?
I think it's going to be extremely popular this year. I think, if we send out our pre-orders like we normally do, right, and we use our trade in, trade up like our members should be doing, I don't think Callaway's going to be able to keep up.
You listen to what James is saying. I mean, number 1, the Paradym driver, the Paradym Fairwoods are basically the same price that Smoke as the Paradym introduced last year. We have introductory rates, a little bit cheaper. Okay. They brought the pricing of the irons down. They thought they overpriced them a little bit last year because it was the metal they put in there last year was kind of a forged type metal and was softer. And so it was kind of more expensive. So the Paradym Smoke irons, which is a cast kind of metal, they brought the pricing down.
It's very similar to what the Rogue was 2 years ago.
Right. So Callaway believed they may have overpriced the market last year. So right now, today, or in January, you can trade in your Paradyms from last year for the new Paradym Smokes and get the whole thing for a couple $100.
It's going to be very close to that.
Yeah. And the Rogues from 2 years ago, you can trade them in and for like $600 or $700, you can get the whole set. No, it's ridiculous because I've already put some of these in and a guy turned in his Paradym he bought 6 months ago for brand new Paradym Smoke. And the difference was like $170.
Wow.
And it was like, and that was 12 clubs. And I was like, and I didn't realize how good it was. And I was like, oh my Lord.
So what you're saying is we're going to get really busy here in the next couple of weeks.
The reason is because when they released the Paradym last year, the irons were $210 a piece.
Yep.
They're $155 a piece right now.
Yeah.
So there's a $60 difference. And there's like a $55 difference in them. We take that by 7 irons in a set. All of a sudden you're talking $300 or $400 difference.
Yep.
And there you go.
And they haven't modified their, even with the new Paradym, with the release coming out early, it's late in the month, but it's still before they typically change their rates on the trade in, trade up scale.
And that's their thing I'm going to bring in here. We'll end it this way, but I want you to talk. James runs my trade in, trade up program. You guys all out there that know that bought clubs and traded stuff in, know that I give you the spiel and then James takes care of you guys. Tell them about that a little bit real quick. We'll just kind of end it this way. You follow trade and trade up daily. You buy hourly, probably by the minute. I mean, like I do, but I'm the one that talks to the guys and you follow up on it. Okay. Tell them about how the rates change. Would you please tell them out there? Because I keep telling them this and they don't believe me. They don't believe you. Talk about the trade and trade up rates. Would you?
Well, you get into a conversation with the guys when they're buying their clubs, and it may be one email. It may be
100 emails.
Right. And while that's going on, we get closer and closer and closer to the end of the month.
Correct.
On the first of the month, every month, Callaway comes up with a new trade table.
It's not Callaway, it's a national trade table.
It's everybody, every company that does trade and trade up changes the rates at the first of the month.
Right.
So on the first of the month, Callaway will put out a new rate table for this coming month.
Right.
And if you're at the end of the month and all of a sudden you're at the 29th or you're the 30th of the month and you're saying, well, I may do it, I may not do it. And then all of a sudden you say, February 3rd, you go, okay, let's do this. I want to make the trade now. Well, you take the chance. Your rates may have changed.
And they change down. They never change up.
They never go up.
They never go up. They go down.
No. So that's why when we do the trade up and all of a sudden we send you the trade paperwork back and you say, well, how come it dropped? I'm like, I'm getting $50, $75 less on my trade than I did 2 weeks ago. I said, because you went over the month and I have to use the trade table when we establish the trade.
When an order is placed, the day it is placed, the rates are held that day. So Absolutely. If we place an order on the 30th, they're held that day. Yes. We don't put the rate to do. And James is very diligent about that because he knows how these things change. In fact, our busiest days are the last couple of days of the month because we're cramming in the orders those last few days of the month. But I give you trade rates on the 29th, like James said, and then you tell me on the 4th, you want to put the order in. So you don't confirm it for a week. That's the day they go in. That's the day. Now, sometimes they change, sometimes they don't. Okay. But it's a quantity issue. So if right now, like a Paradym driver right now, you can trade it in with a member's bonus and get like $375 for it. Yeah. $375. So it's just under $400. Okay. And a lot of people bought that driver for just under $500. Okay. So all of a sudden now the whole world is going to be trading their Paradym for this new Paradym Smoke in January. So all of a sudden February goes out and Callaway looks at their inventory and they got 6,000 Paradym heads sitting there.
That have to go into the pre-owned sale.
They have to go into the pre-owned sale or go on eBay. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to drop it down and say, okay, you're going to get a little bit less for it now because we can't sell them that much anymore because the supply versus demand out there, they go down. Am I right?
True.
So that's why when you do this and all those out there that kind of have our lease program where they do a new driver every year, don't wait 2 or 3 months. Do it as fast as possible because we want to get you the highest rates. Typically, January and February's rates are very similar. March and April is when you start seeing them get hit because March and April is when guys start playing golf and start thinking about replacing their equipment and starts getting the new stuff out there and so on.
It'll follow the cycle of when the new seasons are opening.
Right.
West from west to east, from south to north.
Right. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out to you guys because we get that question a lot and James, has to deal with that a lot, emails and calls. But anyway, so think the Smoke's going to be a hit?
I do.
Okay.
Honestly do.
Yeah. I think it's gonna be a big hit too. I'm already getting a lot of questions on it. So I wanted to do this podcast, but, I want to thank you again, James, for helping me with helping us with that. Getting the fitter of the year. That's a really, really big deal.
It's a good feather in our hat.
It is a big feather in our hat. It gives us a lot of perks. Callaway's coming in and building out our center here and they're putting,
that's going to be so good.
And they're putting a lot of money and a lot of effort into the center that we're doing. I mean, a lot. I don't think we could afford it, what they're going to do.
No.
So it's going to be very cool.
I think when it's all done and the grass is finally green and everything is settled, we are going to be the best facility in probably the U.S.
I don't disagree. What they're talking to us about doing for us, I don't doubt that.
No.
I mean, they're talking about putting leaderboards. They're talking about TVs and that they have ongoing leaderboards for tournaments that are going on right now.
Yeah.
So you can sit in there and be fit and look up and see where the guy just birdied a hole in the tournament in Hawaii. And I mean, they're talking about putting active leaderboards in our place. I mean, I'm listening going, oh my God.
Yeah.
So
the more they talk about, the more excited we get. When we had a great meeting yesterday with our guys and we had a vision and I think they've taken that vision and expanded it by a factor of 100.
Yeah, I agree. So, but we'll talk more about that later. We'll talk when that thing gets going. And we hope
the teaser for next time.
Yeah, by June or July of this year, we'll get that sucker going and get it in there. So thanks, James. Appreciate it, bud. And guys there, if you guys got any questions on the Paradym Smoke or anything, give me an email, give us a shout, and we'll get you guys going. We'll be pouring those orders in for the next few weeks, or I'd say that for this year, but they'll be hot and heavy in January for the pre-order. So anyway, we're putting them in and we're getting them going. You guys, you got any questions, let us know. We'll talk to you guys real soon.